Hi, welcome to your sourdough tutorial. Today we are going to make a loaf of sourdough bread. And the first thing you do with any sourdough is you start with your starter. I recommend you keep it in a crock, but really a mason jar or any non-metal dish will do. It's best to let it breathe. I cover mine with a coffee filter and the lid. And it's okay if there's a little bit of liquid on top, just stir it in. Again, avoid using metal if you can because it can do funny things to the sourdough, okay? So the first part of this recipe, let me get a spoon here, is you need to start with a cup of starter, okay? So I have my 1 cup measuring cup. I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna measure out my cup of starter. I like to get them close together, otherwise it's drippy, drippy mess. Okay, take your spatula and get all or as much of that good starter as you can out, okay? Now, I'm going to come over here to my sink because now that we have a cup of starter in our bowl, I'm going to push this to the side and we're going to feed our starter. I like to feed it right after I put the starter in the bowl so I'm not forgetting, all right? And feeding a starter, hold on here. You want equal amounts of water and flour, okay? So I took out a cup of starter and I am going to put a cup of water and a cup of flour back in. Okay, I like to keep a rather large amount of starter in on hand because it just makes it easier when I go, because some of my recipes will use a cup, the average recipe will use a cup. But some of my recipes will use upwards of 2 cups of starter. I've made things like sourdough bread and cakes and all kinds of stuff from sourdough. It's really, really delicious. The cake you would never know. But anyways, here's the cup of flour. When you measure your flour, use a spoon to put into your measuring cup and then level it off. I've done experiments both ways and it is really best to use the spoon to measure in, okay? So now that we have this, you're gonna stir this around and it's not gonna matter if it's a little lumpy or clumpy. You just want everything well incorporated because it'll do its own little magic thing, okay? I recommend that you get to know your starter very well. It is a living organism. A lot of people even name theirs. Mine's Dobby. It always is Dobby, no matter what kind of starter I get. Okay, so now that we have this, put this in the sink, put this on top. This is now done. So I'm gonna leave this out overnight, and then once I have this overnight, tomorrow morning I will put this into the fridge. Always leave your starter out overnight after you feed it. And then after that, it can store into the fridge up to 1 week before you need to take some out and feed it again. Whether you make a loaf of bread or whether you dump it down your toilet, if you have a septic tank like I do, it's really, really great. It's just like dumping yeast down. But either way, feed it once a week via fridge or every other day to every couple of days on the countertop, okay? I'm gonna come over here real quick and I'm going to wash my hands. Okay, so back to our bread. So we have our starter in our bowl. This is a no knead, basically 2-step type sourdough. It is the easiest sourdough I have ever made. I've made several different styles, several different types, and it is the easiest one. And the good thing about this sourdough, or like any sourdough, is you can use any type of flour. As far as the starter, I recommend using a white, unbleached, all-purpose, non-GMO flour such as Montana wheat. And when you feed the starter, I recommend the all-purpose unbleached flour to feed it. Now, once you do the starter though, any flour after that you can use. So if you're a normal person, continue to use white, or if you want to be healthy, use whole wheat. If you're like me and are special and need to use certain kind of flours, then you can do that too. It's so versatile, okay? With this sourdough recipe, it makes approximately 1.5 pound loaf. So you're going to need a rather large bread pan. Metal, glass, it doesn't matter. You just want upwards of a 2-pound loaf pan, okay? Make sure your starter is room temperature, so anytime if you keep yours in the fridge like I do, make sure that you pull it out about 2 hours prior to making your thing so that your starter can come up to room temp, okay? Once you do that, we have the 1 cup of starter, so now we are going to mix in 1 cup of water. You want it somewhat warm. And this is just to kind of loosen your starter up, okay? And I have my trusty spoonula. Okay, it's gonna really look like white water. That's all it's gonna look like by the time you get done mixing that up, okay? Now we add 2.5 cups of flour, okay? I tend to use, when I do my special measurement for flours, the 1/2 cup because all my containers are a bit smaller. My spoon, okay, so again, we're gonna spoon our flour in. And if you're messy like me, it's okay, just hold your, your cup inside. Take the edge of the spoon right here. Okay, so there's half. One. One half. Okay, so you'll see me take the long part of my spoon right there and go first towards me and then away from me, and it just helps to fill in all the little cracks on your measuring cup. 2, okay, last one. Okay. The only other ingredient other than starter and flour that we have to add to this bread is salt, because it is imperative that you add salt. And this is going to be 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I have these really nifty old school Tupperware measure spoons, and this happens to be up to 1.5 teaspoons. Okay, so if it looks like I'm putting in only 1, it's really 1.5. Right here I have Himalayan pink salt. You can use sea salt or any salt that you have on hand. I happen to only use sea salt or Himalayan pink, but that is just my personal preference. Okay, so once you have it, I'm going to try to tip this so you can see it looks like one gloppy mess because you have wet and flour all sitting right there. You're just going to stir gently at first, because if you go too fast, you're going to have flour all over the place. I speak from experience. Okay, once you start getting it incorporated, start folding it in. I like to do the folding because it helps me not to over mix. I constantly just scrape my bowl and put it back in on each other. All you're looking to do, okay, is get that flour all moistened. It doesn't have to be over beaten. It doesn't have to be anything other than just the flour is completely wet. We're not looking for anything else at this point, okay? Okay, so here you go. See that? That's what it's going to look like when it's all mixed in and moistened, okay? So now at this point, get your trusty plastic wrap out and cover your bowl. I typically make this bread, this point right here, the night before I'm gonna bake it. I'll make it like around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And I do the second half the next morning around 8 or 9 in the morning. You know, it's really easy. Let this sit out on the countertop overnight, upwards of 24 hours. If you are like me, and sometimes you make this and then realize you get really, really busy the next day, put it in the fridge once the night is over. Put it in the fridge, and you can let it sit up to 24 hours, you know, in the fridge. All that's gonna do with sourdough is make your bread extra sour, more like the really sour San Francisco dough, rather than a light flavor. The longer you let a sourdough starter sit, the more sour taste you get and the more fermented it gets. It'll change the composition of the whole flour and the dough. Okay, so we're gonna set that aside. So, lucky for you, I already have some. This is gonna be a really sour loaf because I let it sit for so long. Okay, but this is what it looks like once it's sat for 12 to 24 hours, okay? It just looks like a risen dough, like any other risen dough. It's gonna smell really, really yeasty, okay? And at this point, we're just going to do this. And we're not really gonna need a whole lot because you don't need to knead this dough, okay? This is a really easy, if you're busy like me, or if you've never really done bread before, this is the perfect bread to start with, okay? So as you can see, I like to get my hands a little floury, and you're gonna come over here and you're gonna scrape that dough away, okay? Get as much out of your bowl as you can. Don't be alarmed if some sticks. That is normal, okay? Especially if you don't grease your bowl. I just realized I need a little more on top. Okay, so at this point, you're going to knead it only long enough to get the stickiness out of the dough so that it's not sticking to your hands and everything else, because you really don't need to knead this particular thing. This is not like other sourdough recipes or your normal yeast dough where you gotta really work it, okay? This is a really easy, light kneading, which is perfect for somebody with carpal tunnel like me, okay? So once you get the stickiness out, okay, and you have your ball of dough, now the recipe calls to like roll it out with a rolling pin and the whole 9 yards, and you can. Or you can just do what I do, because I've been making bread for so long. I've made every type possible. Is you're really just gonna press it out, use your fingers, this is the easiest way. And kind of make an oblong loaf, just like that, okay? Then you're going to get your trusty bedpan, and you will need grease, okay? End of story. I'm gonna do this over the sink. Okay. Because otherwise it ends up on a really slick floor. Okay, so now we're just gonna take this and we're literally gonna plop it in. And we're gonna press it out so that it kind of molds to the bottom. And instead of spraying the plastic wrap, because it can become a real fight, I'm gonna show you a trick. Take it and just spray your top. And then you don't have to fight this with Pam spray all over it. I learned that the hard way. Okay, we're going to put saran wrap over it again. And we're gonna let this rise, okay? You let this rise for a minimum of 2 hours. It can really rise overnight in the fridge, or, you know, if you're gonna do more than 2 hours on the countertop, anytime in the fridge, just take it out an hour before you bake it so that it can come up to room temperature and it will bake more evenly that way, okay? And then, once it's risen, it's going to literally double in size just like a normal loaf. I don't have one already doubled in size for you, but it will come double in size. It will just slightly heap over the side a little bit. It won't get very far. It will just rise up and like literally just come up to the edges right here once it's ready. Okay, get my chicken bowl. See this? This is a bench scraper. I use this so much in baking to clean my countertops. Okay, once you're done, You're gonna preheat your oven to 450 degrees, and you will bake it for 20 to 25 minutes, depending on your oven and the weather, okay? When you're done, it will come out, not this glossy because I have it in a plastic bag, but there's an air hole on top right here. This is a very light, very airy sourdough bread recipe. So I have a nice air hole right here. It's probably because I let it rise a little too long. But when you're done, let it cool about 10, 15 minutes in the pan, and then pop it out onto a wire cooling rack. You can even let it cool as little as 5 and just use a pot holder to take it out. But when you do, turn it over and do this. And if you hear it sounding hollow when you tap on the bottom, then your bread is done. That's all you need. No toothpick test, no, none of that. And you have a beautiful, gorgeous loaf of sourdough bread. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope this really helps you. If you have any questions, by all means, talk to me online. And I'll see you later. Thanks.